One of the values of the Trump administration is economic development. He wants every citizen in this country to realize his true potential, whatever that is. And economic development is in his background. He's a businessman.
Sure.
He's built businesses. And one thing that he's focuses on is the development of every city, of every state in this country. The centerpiece of this is the notion that opportunity zones, which were the brainchild of Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina. And Senator Scott had the idea that if a certain piece of property was low income, that's the right thing to do is offer economic incentives. That's different from a government handout.
Yes, it is.
It's economic incentives, where as a developer, and that's my background, real estate development, you go in, you can take a piece of property, you put your own equity in, and for 5 years, if you hold the piece of property for 5 years, it's successful in whatever venture it is, whether it's multifamily, commercial, or residential. You get a 50% tax break on capital gains. If you hold it 10 years, you don't pay any tax on the capital gains. And in other words, if I buy a piece of property and have, just for round figures, $100 in it, if after 5 years I can sell it to make $150, I pay 50% tax on that $50 capital gains. If I hold it for 10 years, I pay zero tax. That gives you the incentive to invest your own money, to do the market studies, to put its highest and best use. And that's the way you're going to build this country.
So what you're saying is the private sector, private businessmen really have the greater role in rebuilding, for example, the inner cities that are currently being burned down. Is that correct?
We do, and government, government cannot replace the private sector.
Exactly.
The taxes that all of us pay funds government, which has really gotten away from its core values. We're everything from, we ought to be just for basics, law enforcement,
yes,
water, sewer. Basics, taking care of those who are disabled. That's what the purpose of government is. And some other things. Public-private partnerships are fine. I've seen it from my role where, the private sector gets hosed on this.
Yes.
But the bottom line is you're using the private sector, you're incentivizing them with a tax benefit that only occurs if you make it successful.
Yes.
The onus is on the developer to make sure the project makes sense, is economically viable.
Yes.
And you're not taking money that you send to the government. You're not dependent on this.
Exactly.
On government. So it makes perfect sense. I commend the president. I commend Tim Scott.
Yes.
The other part of this is the infrastructure package that he's talked about. We've had agreement. Everybody wants infrastructure, roads, bridges, and everybody wants it. But what has gotten in the way is everybody wants their private dollars. As an example, some want broadband. They won't put a broadband ahead of anything else.
Yes.
I will make the argument that bridges, and what spurred me onto this is going to a bridge, a manufacturer of a machine that goes under bridges and looks. And he showed me some pictures of bridges that you are driving on, I'm driving on, Rick is driving on, that you wouldn't drive on. Now, is it going to take an accident? That's where I think you take the priorities.
Sure.
And you prioritize. You only have a certain amount of money. And so where it's gotten in the way is different projects, different people, different constituencies want different things. I can understand that rural community wanting broadband.
Sure.
I mean, that makes perfect sense. We're going to have to get a happy medium. The dollars that are being talked about at $1.2 trillion, $1.3 trillion, with the coronavirus hit and with all this destruction, I don't know where the money's coming from.
Sure.
We can only borrow so much.
Yeah.
If you're a family that's struggling and borrowing every dime, there is an end game. There is an end point that you can't borrow anymore.
Yes.
So we're going to have to balance that, but hopefully we will do that in the coming term.